Hello, everybody. It's Anthony Simon here, and welcome back to Run to Remember podcast. And you might be watching this on your podcast platform or on YouTube. And today we have the wonderful coach Sarah Davis. Amazing story, or stories, should I say? A little bit of background about Sarah. She is a professional risk manager. And I emphasize on that because there was a lot of risk that you've taken throughout your life and going to do, no doubt, in the coming decades as well. Definitely a passion for risk taking. You spent over 2 decades in risk management, primarily with financial services, working with some of the major banks, NAB, Macquarie, Citibank, running projects and leading teams. In your 40s, in search of more out of life, you decided to step away from your corporate life and attempt to paddle the length of the Nile. I mean, what makes you do that? We'll find out a little bit more. After 2 years of planning this paddle, you hit the water, and what followed was absolutely a life-changing adventure. You survived hippo attacks, been arrested, detained in the Burundi, and running lethal rapids. Your book, Sarah's book about this expedition, has been published. It's called Paddle the Nile, One Woman's Search for a Life Less Ordinary. I love that. You went on to some other major things that you've done, just a few. You've paddled the Murray River in Australia, close to a lot of the family at Hands Across the Water. You've cycled nearly 5,000 kilometres across Australia, and another solo bike pack adventure, 1,600 kilometres through Oman. Wow, crikey, Sarah. So you focus on helping leaders now, founders and individuals, to be bold, to think bigger and become bigger risk takers. You embrace uncertainty, overcome fears, challenge the status quo. Oh my gosh, it just goes on. Your mantra, just finishing off before we hear from you, is your overarching message is think big, act bold, do more. Welcome, Sarah, to the Run to Remember podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for such a great intro. That's awesome.
I mean, just first up, like in terms of, deciding to paddle the Nile, and obviously in your book you explain it wasn't just an epiphany to paddle the Nile. It was more about that change and not, thinking, okay, I'm living an ordinary life. I want to have an extraordinary, adventurous life. What was it that pivotal moment?
Well, like you said, it had been building up for a long time. And, it's one of those, I had a great career, but it felt like having a really beautiful piece of clothing, but it didn't quite suit me and it didn't quite fit me.
Yeah,
And I just wanted to find something that was more me. And I'd had a break out, like mid to late 30s as a personal trainer. So I became a personal trainer, like followed my passion for sport, did that for a few years, then got sort of sucked back into banking, and then found myself in this great job and going, okay, this is as good as corporate in this kind of role is going to get, but it just isn't it. And it was watching the sun come up. It was a New Year's morning down at Bondi, and I
yeah,
wasn't up from partying like that. That's all way behind me.
yeah, yeah.
And I was for various things had happened in the year before. What I had in front of me was a blank canvas, effectively, and I just
So you
decided
had already resigned from corporate?
no, I was still in corporate, but it was at that point I made a decision. Okay, it's time to find out what it is I'm searching for. And
Yeah,
I've still felt like I was, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? And it was this beautiful life, but it just felt a little bit. I heard someone saying the other day, it's almost like feeling a little bit hollow. Like there just wasn't enough substance to it.
yeah.
And yeah, and I think it's always very easy to go, okay, this isn't it. It's then, well, what is? And that's what can be quite tricky.
Did those, obviously it was something that grew from within. Did it have any outwardly signs like your health, mental health or physical or relation? Did it have any signs there, or it was just this inner gut feel?
there was an inner, it was the inner gut feel of like this just isn't quite it. But I
Yeah.
definitely, I mean, I'd had some real challenges with mental health, and off the back, that I hadn't had my darkest time that previous 12 months, but I had
Yeah.
had a bout of depression, and I, dusted myself off from that.
Mm.
Uh and interestingly, it was something, we'll get more into the expedition, but just while we brought up the topic, I was worried about potentially having a depressive episode while I was away.
Yeah.
What I found during the 2 years of organizing and the time it took to execute, my mental health was never better. And I think it just comes back to the difference it can make. It's not to say people would never have mental health challenges during doing things like this. But for me
Gosh, yeah.
personally, that having that real clear North Star that I was working towards, that real purpose,
Yes.
um, it, for me, I think that fundamentally, it definitely helped my mental health.
Yeah, something, I guess, building up that resilience of some of those earlier challenges and, in risk management. But one of your mantras is, and on this particular trip, and we'll definitely go into, it more, but you said control the controllables. So how did how did that help when there was just so many challenges outside of your control? I mean, I've got a list here. I might just read some out, and then maybe if we can
Yeah,
expand and
yeah.
unwrap some of those. I mean,
Mm.
you had some what may be simple challenges in Australia that was not there, like car troubles, flat tires, breaking down, the driver being arrested, you know, your yeah, multiple hippos. And for those that don't know, hippos is the number one killer of humans on Earth in terms of animals, I believe.
Mammals, yeah, yeah, yeah. Other
Yeah.
than
So
humans.
yeah, yes, yeah. I definitely want to unpack some of those because you had some hairy things there where it just latched onto your raft and you're kind of there. Your entire crew got arrested and you're under house arrest for 3 days. More hippos, raging waterfalls, the threat of kidnap, and a jagger being cut out of your foot. So we might expand on what a jagger is as well, and tell people to stop eating. But you know, maybe maybe let's dive into some of those incredible uh, scenarios and just how you controlled your mind through the, seemingly uncontrollables.
Yeah, I mean, just, on that whole concept of the control of controllables, because like you're right, there was so much outside of my control, like so
Yeah,
much. Because really, what I, you know and what I've read, it's like it's only thing that we can control is our response, which is what we do, what we say, and what we think. And that is really
yeah,
it. Then there's got a slightly wider sphere as to where we can have some influence, but there's not a lot. So it was just trying to come back to it because otherwise I was just going to stress about everything. So then
yeah,
a lot of it came into the preparation. So being prepared to know that I could respond to the situations, so that's like
yeah,
doing hostile environment awareness training, doing swiftwater rescue technician, remote first aid, all of those things to sort of feel enough confidence to go, what gets thrown at me, I'm going to be able to deal with, having the right team around me. So I'm not a whitewater, paddler. I do ocean,
yeah,
I don't do
yeah,
white water. So when it came to the rafting sections, I knew I had to be the weakest link in that raft, and I had to have like the A team around me from a
yeah,
paddling, and white water perspective, because then it's like, okay, I know I can trust in them to do the right thing when we hit problems, and we have those uncontrollable sort of scenarios of crazy rapids and stuff like that. So yeah, it was then learning that I would, and through the trip, building up the trust to know that I would be able to respond appropriately, and as much as
yeah.
possible, getting to that point that I'm responding and not reacting.
So you were
Uh,
kind of changing your mindset of knowing that there would be some curly scenarios or uncontrollables. You trained your mindset of saying, no, they're not going to be uncontrollables, they're going to be controllables. And that was the way you thought about it and prepared for those things.
yeah, just knowing to, to know that I could respond accordingly, and what was within my control would be appropriate for the situations. But I mean, it's really easy to say that, and I went into it going,
Yeah,
okay, control the controllables. but we can dive into some of the stuff like around the hippos, and because it was just an ongoing threat. And day 6, we had this horrific situation where it was literally it was so day 6 on the expedition, day
Yeah,
1 in hippo territory. Woke up
yeah.
and in my tent that morning. So obviously, we're camped up right next to the rivers. Me, 3 Ugandan rafting guides. And I heard a hippo making its way up river. And when I'd done my risk assessment, obviously hippos was definitely one of the risks that I'd identified.
Do
It
they
was
make
one
a
of my
sound, Sarah? Like, do they make a sound or?
I mean, it's one that sends my blood cold. It really
Yeah,
does. I can't do a very good hippo impression. I won't try, but it's this sort of deep huff puff and a bit of a, almost like a grunt. I'd say
because
it's
it's like a
there's like
cow,
this
isn't it? They're,
grunting.
they're cows, but they make this
There's
awful.
this sort of grunting, hefty sort of noise, and yeah, it's very distinctive. It's not.
Yeah,
It's quite a sort of a deep, resounding, but it's got some power behind it.
yeah,
So I heard these things, going upstream, and we got on the river, and you could just feel like amongst us all there was that bit of tension. It was just the unspoken. You talk about elephant in the room, like the
yeah,
hippo in the room, and we set off. And the thing when you're in hippo territory, what these guys knew because they dealt with them before. What I've been told is generally you slap the surface of the water with a paddle or whatever you've got, because then they'll pop up. They spend most of the day sleeping underwater. They can stay underwater for 5 minutes or more at a time, pop up, have a breath, and go back down. So they come up. You can see where they are and try and go around them. And the problem here was that the river was relatively narrow, so it was only, I don't know, maybe 50 or so meters wide. So there wasn't a lot of wriggle room, and they can move pretty
yeah,
damn quick. Anyway, we got around our first ones, and then we came up, a little while later. The river was very windy, and you had these short, steep banks. So what that meant is your visibility, you couldn't see that far ahead. And we
yeah.
came up to this sort of left, right, and as we approached, sort of about to start turning left, in the shallows in the opposite corner, we saw this baby hippo pop up, and it was like, oh, okay. So we stopped paddling, but of course the river's moving, so it takes us forward. And I just got the words out, where's mum? She pops up on the right of us, and we drift between her and her baby.
Gosh.
You don't need to be much of a guru on hippos to know that we messed up big time. And so she
And
came
Sarah,
at
how
us.
big a raft are you in? Just so I'm sort of
This
imagining,
is
50
those.
meter wide.
No, so those are the commercial rafting trips. You'd have seen those sort of
Yeah,
red rafts. It would be, I don't know, no more than 3 meters, less than 3 meters long, maybe that. But it's what we had was, obviously there was 4 of us on there. You got a white water kayak so that if we hit rapids, the guy could go, and one of the guys, Co, could go and scout out the route if there was one. We
yeah,
had barrels filled with food. We've got a barrel with electrical items. It's all our camping gear. Like, there's a lot of stuff on this thing. So when she came at us, and I didn't see it, but Co, who was on the oars, we had a frame and oars. So you'd have one person, like one of the guys on the oars, forward paddling effectively, so facing forward and rowing, and 2 of us up front paddling. So he said she tried to like put her head under and flip us, but obviously couldn't because there was just so much stuff. So then the next thing, we're desperately trying to get to the riverbank, and I just felt this tug on the raft, and look behind me, and there she was. She'd bitten into the back of the raft.
and how
Luckily,
big is this? Like, how big's the, like, do you see the teeth just open and?
I didn't see the because she'd already bitten into it, so I just turned
Yeah,
around and could just see this huge hippo. And amazingly, like, we obviously, like, the amygdala is firing at this point, but I did have a vaguely sane thought, which was there's still 2 meters of raft between her and me and Koa and the oars and everything, so it's not over yet. So it's just this white, almost, I describe it as white fear, and just kept paddling. Luckily, she let go of the raft. I don't know if it was the bursting of, because it would have like burst as she bit into it. Like, that's a highly
yeah.
inflated raft. It's in sections, so it wasn't like the whole thing then deflated. It was just that section at the
Just that
back that went
section.
down. But I
Yeah.
mean, she put a hole like this in it. Anyway, so she let go. We got to the edge. We jump out, like you can imagine, we leap out of this raft. And then watch, and she sort of backs off enough, and then we unload everything. There were some local farmers around. They help us then unload everything, drag the raft out, and then the boys Spent about an hour or so patching it, so putting a patch on the inside and the outside and gluing it. But that was day 6,
Yeah,
and we had weeks of dealing with hippos. So then trying to get into this, control the controllables.
yeah, yeah,
So much easier said than done. And we came up with different approaches for dealing with them, but I had to come back to accept, like, I have to trust in the team that we will, make the right decisions if we get
yeah.
attacked again. I've either got the choice of either I stop the expedition now or I keep going, accept the risk as it is, and be confident that we'll just deal with what happens. Because sitting
Yeah.
there and constantly stressing about, and I was at times just on absolute tenterhooks of like, is there one, is there one? We'd come into hippo territory and then I'm paranoid for the rest of the day. Obviously, that's not going to help me respond to a situation. If anything, it's going to make it worse because I'm
That's right.
emotionally drained, and energetically drained by
Yeah,
stressing all the
yeah.
way. So I had to really force myself and like literally give myself a talking to of like, just stop, accept this, control the controllables. Let's deal with it when we have to.
And that was just really trusting your guides, and it had been done, in terms of, it was a river, you're on water, you're in a raft, and that's about controlling that in your environment, your aura
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah, as much as we could around it. And like one of the guys, Peter, was extraordinary at coming up with solutions in high pressure situations. So before we got back on the river after the attack, he said, okay, what we're going to do going forward is if we see a hippo, we stop, assuming we can, we get out of the raft, get on the riverbank, and we just tow the raft past.
Yeah,
And I'm like, oh my God, that is just genius. I'm just so compliant and, oh, well, this is what we've been told to do. So we just do this. This
yeah,
is why having a team around you who can come up with different ideas is so important. And so he was able to come up with this approach and we put that into practice. Would have been an hour later when we met, what I assume was the father of the baby, this huge
yeah.
male hippo who put on a psychotic display, but we were able to get off, tow the raft past, and it worked brilliantly. Another time we were dealing with a hippo, we couldn't do that, but Peter was watching this hippo, and we kept going under the water and coming back up. So it had just started following us, and we were like, "Is it going to attack?" We didn't know. Stop. So
Gosh,
Peter was
so
watching it, and it would sort of go
yeah,
under and come back up, under and come back up. He said, "Okay, what we're going to do next time it goes under, we get back in the raft because it was just the vegetation meant we could not tow the raft."
yeah.
And then he said, then wait, it'll go back under again. Then when it goes under again, then we go off in stealth mode. And again, it was just this ability to think in these incredibly stressful situations. So we did that. And Koa said he looked behind as we then pushed off and went and like paddling hard, but as quietly as we possibly could. And this
Yeah.
hippo popped up, saw that we weren't there, didn't occur to this thing to sort of do well, where did they go? He was, oh, they've gone, and then made its way back upstream. And so it was really learning to trust in the team around to
I love
respond.
that you had such your team, probably even more so to you, and probably kept a few things from you in that they knew what potential, major things not could happen, that probably will happen, and they did, and they were very much solution orientated,
Yeah.
protecting you because you were on this, incredible journey that
Mm.
had never been done before, which we might just talk about in a moment, but. I want to just for Pete doing the run right now. He's going to be listening
Yeah.
to this, and there's not going to be hippos that are going to come, but who knows? There might be an elephant, but probably not. I mean, I've done a few rides over there, and the elephants are are on the side of the road, and they're every now and again, but they're not going to be charging him. I
But
wouldn't
it's the
imagine.
stray dogs, there's a lot of stray dogs there. That could be an issue.
Yeah.
There's going to be things, challenges that are bound to come up.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important and powerful and encouraging to have a supportive team around
Mm.
you. You know, tell us a little bit more about why the Nile. Like what? So you knew that you wanted to do something, uh, you know, incredible, and but why the Nile?
So you know, my ego definitely wanted it to be a first. There was that.
Well,
I
the
really
first
wanted
ever,
it
not your first, but the
a,
first, no one had ever done it.
a first
Yeah,
of some kind.
yeah,
I knew it was, I wanted it to be paddling, that was my, so that was my sport. And it was only, what hasn't been done. And when I saw no woman had gone from source to sea, so someone had gone from Lake Victoria to the sea, but no one had gone from Rwanda
yeah,
and done that human powered. So when I saw that, and I love Africa, yeah, I've been to Africa on quite a few holidays, adventure holidays, and it was, a real visceral response. It was the thought of doing an expedition in Africa. I was like, oh my goodness, that would be extraordinary. Thankfully, there was a lot more to my why behind it, because I think if that, that's pure extrinsic motivation. And there is no way extrinsic motivation would have got me through the whole thing. It was far more, I still can't fully put into words why I wanted to do it, but I just knew it was so right. And it was so what I wanted to do.
yeah.
So when it spoiler alert, it definitely, there were some firsts wrapped up in it, but it very quickly, wasn't about the first. And I certainly didn't do the whole, end up being able to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
But did do it, did a lot of it, did do a lot of it.
Yeah. But I guess, something that you wrote and it's on your website, if it excites you and scares you at the same time, you should probably do it, right?
Absolutely.
Um, why do you think people hold back from their fears? Like, so it's exciting, yet it scares them. Why do they stop? Like, or what can you know, suggest to them to push through that fear? And what are the rewards
Mm.
whilst not so much when finishing, but in the process and the journey? What are the rewards during that journey?
Oh, I mean, there's so many rewards, but I mean, from the fear, fear stops us from doing so much. It absolutely stops me from doing things. Anyone with a functioning amygdala is going to have dealt with fear at some point, and it's potentially held us back. And it's what I share with my clients, and actually I was just finishing off the slides for a session I've got this evening, and it's all about overcoming fear. And there's so many different approaches. You can go and Google it. There's different ways out there. It's finding what works for you. I talk to people about name it, rate it, reduce it, getting specific on what the fear is. Because sometimes I think we can go, oh, that's a bit scary. And we just instantly lean back and
Yeah.
don't keep moving towards. If we actually get really specific on what it is, and we get that perspective and we shine a light on it, we start to take away some of its power, and we start to get, as I say, that perspective on it. And maybe it's not quite as scary as we think when we actually put it under the microscope.
And
you
how is
know
there a process to do that, Sarah? Like, is it writing it down? Is it talking it through with a confidant, a mentor, or
Whatever
like
works
how
for
do you?
you. Like, everyone's, I think
Yeah,
we're all different. Me, I'm quite analytical, and I'll, potentially get a pen with, like, okay, dig into it. What is this really about? Where is this fear coming from? It would so depend on what it is that you're looking at, but getting specific.
yeah.
And then rate it, give it, what is that out of 10? Is it an 8? Is it a 6? If it's an 8 or a 9 and it just feels like it's too much, what would a 4 look like? Could you start with that? So I always use the example of public speaking. I think most people would relate to feeling some kind of fear with public speaking, or and for the first
Yeah.
time that they started doing it. So speaking to a room of 100 people for an hour would be potentially a 9 or a 10. What would a 3 or a 4 be? Okay, well, it might be talking to 10 people for 10 minutes, and then start
Yeah.
there, and gradually build up. That is one way to deal with fear. It's doing the risk management approach, like really unpacking what could go wrong and coming
Yes.
up with ways to either reduce the likelihood or the impact, or having a plan in place if it does happen. Like, again, that helps get perspective, and it creates boundaries of what you're getting into. Just finding that way of what's it going to take for you to just take the next step. Just
I mean,
take
I'm
one more
sure
step.
a
Just
lot
one
of
more
people,
step.
yeah, a lot of people would have set themselves a challenge whilst Pete is running 1,400 kilometers,
Yeah.
or, in the past, riders have ridden, either 800 kilometers or 500 kilometers over 8 or 5 days. or they've signed up to the the Ride to Remember
Yeah.
next year in 2025. I guess likewise, they all have their fears, but
Mm,
they have another or greater reason to do it. And from what you're saying there, of you know, thinking about, don't think about how big it is. Just think about, okay, can I ride 5 kilometers? Can I
mm,
ride, whatever it might be? The very first time that I signed up to the bike ride 11 years ago, I seriously remember riding about 3 kilometers, and I hadn't exercised for about 10 years, a great deal. And I had asthma and I was in all sorts,
mm.
now, it's changed and doing
Yep.
half Ironman, and I have a goal to do a full Ironman next year. Like it's just one step at a time. And likewise, you have these amazing adventures individually in this
Yep.
massive adventure. Yeah, it's incredible. If I could sort of, one other thing that came about, you were really advised to organise a kidnap negotiator before you left Australia. What I mean, surely there's a lot of fear that comes comes out of that.
Absolutely. I went through this hostile environment awareness training before I left, which is all around understanding the threats and how to respond, in hostile environments. So that is everything from a kidnap and then learning out the stages of a kidnap and how to avoid it. And if you're being shot at, how to stay safe. So I had a day of being drilled and then some country specific stuff. So we just spent a whole day looking at worst case. And I walked out of that session and it was like, what am I doing? Like, this is insane. This is
Yeah,
ridiculous. Am I being reckless here? Because the risk manager in me starts going, oh, Sarah, maybe we're being a bit silly here. And then I reminded myself, like, no, we've just gone through every possible worst case. We're now
yeah,
going to come up with all the, ways of how we will reduce the likelihood of that happening. So that was then me engaging actually the guy that did that training, his company to then he was a person I checked in with every day, and he was giving me intel reports. And they had a cyber team who were checking to see whether, dodgy people following me or talking about me in online chat rooms in the dark web. So we had all of this stuff to reduce the likelihood of me getting kidnapped. And then we had to be prepared for a response plan should it happen. Like it was really
yeah,
unlikely, but it was still a possibility. And it's not something you want to be reacting to, you want to respond. And he said, look, it is unlikely, but it's worthwhile thinking about who would be the best person if there was then these protracted kidnap negotiations. Who would that be? Generally, you don't want your closest relatives,
yeah,
whether that's your spouse or your parents or someone that's potentially going to be a little bit more emotionally involved. It's not to say that friends won't be. He's generally they recommend women can be better than men because they're less likely to fire up if the person on their phone starts getting sort of aggressive or threatening, anything like that. But I ended up asking a friend of mine who it was a guy because I just knew he would. I really thought he is absolutely the right person, and it's a really unusual conversation to have, not
yeah.
one I ever expected to have. I've got a favor to ask. Please feel free to say no, but any chance you can be my kidnap negotiator if needed. And
Was that Dave? Was that
no, so
or
Dave
someone?
was a person I was checking in with every day. Daniel was the guy who
Okay.
who I asked, and he just turned around to me and said, "Look, Sarah, I know you would have thought really carefully about who the right person is.
Yeah.
If you think I'm the right person, then absolutely." And it was like, well, that is exactly why I asked. I mean, that response just said everything to me.
Yeah.
So yes, but happy ending, didn't get
That's right.
kidnapped to avoid that, which
Oh
was good.
gosh. And tell me more about Dave, checking in with him each day and what that meant. And did you have, if you're willing to share, tears with him? Did he have tears? Did those soft words of wisdom? Claire, you're listening to this now. Pete's got his up and down. So yeah, tell us about Dave and why you chose Dave.
Oh, look, I mean, when I did my risk assessment, so I did a complete risk assessment, went through, what are all the risks? And I, being the good risk manager, I had 100 and my risk register, 110 odd risks, assessed them. and looking at the response plans for, should I get arrested, which it's almost a rite of passage doing something like this through Africa. The chances of it happening is pretty high. And I don't know what the response is to that. And I couldn't put that on my friends or my family to try and work that out. And for that and a few reasons, I didn't have access to good intel. I wanted to have good intel reporting. And so I engaged Dave. And I wouldn't have finished that expedition if it wasn't for him, I don't
Yeah,
think, because
yeah,
he gave me confidence in my decisions. I had someone who had experience in all of these types of things and doing these kind of expeditions in all these countries I was going through. So that if I wasn't sure about something, I could ask him, look, I'm thinking about changing the route and doing this. What are your thoughts? He'd be, yeah, go. The confidence of knowing that there was someone there if, you know, things went south, he would be able to deal with it. So when we did get arrested in Burundi, I didn't stress. I mean, I probably underestimated the seriousness of the situation in retrospect, but I didn't stress. I just like, okay, message say, by the way, we're being taken by the police. Okay, now they're taking us further into Burundi. He's
yeah,
then messaging me and I'm hiding the satellite phone on me and all of this sort of stuff. And, it's all very, I don't know, James Bondy, and I found it all quite
yeah,
exciting. Like I say, I did underestimate how serious it was. But, I just had total confidence of like, this will get sorted. And he did sort that out. So, and I also knew that he'd be someone who would call me if he thought I was being reckless. And I think too often
yeah,
you can see that, peak fever, that adventurers come unstuck because it's understandably so, you get so focused on got to achieve this that you don't necessarily make good objective decisions. And I knew I had someone there who, if I was being reckless or doing dumb stuff, would call me on it. So yeah, having him there was, yeah, it was really fantastic.
that is, yeah. I mean, he obviously, you said you wouldn't have completed it, you wouldn't have potentially got out of it, you would have broken down like mentally, at
Yeah.
times and made reckless decisions. Like, what a kind of under the arm mentor, or you
Mm,
know, really just that wisdom and
mm,
support on your shoulder. I mean,
yeah.
whether it's an adventure like this or any sort of goal or challenge in life, to have a Dave or a
Yeah.
Claire,
Yeah.
there.
Absolutely. Having those is so essential when you are really pushing yourself and pushing your boundaries. You need to have it, it's almost like having that advisory board and that, or that
Yeah,
one person that you can turn to, and for people you've got someone like Claire who knows him so well, knows when to push and will know when to sort of go, okay, no, you've got to stop, you're being,
yeah,
this is too much. It's just, it is gold. And yeah, so having that support network around you is essential.
yeah, and no doubt would have been very tough for Dave at times too. Having to push back and confront you and you confront him at times.
Yeah, I think there was times it was a long 6 months for him. Constantly, for him, it's like he's on at the end of a phone all the way through. When it came to the situation in Burundi, he drove up to Canberra to be in front of the right people and the right contacts and talking to them. Like, I don't think he slept for 48 hours while that was all going on. Like, he went way above and beyond. And it was amazing, when I got to the end, because he was the only person who had access to be able to see on the GPS where I was at any time or through
Yeah,
my phone. So he could see when I got to the end and called me up. And yeah, it was just, yeah, I got emotional. I don't think he did, but I got emotional.
yeah.
And and then had massive separation anxiety because it was like, what do I do? I've just spent the last 6 months checking in with you. It's like, I'm
Yeah,
not ready. I'm not ready to say goodbye.
yeah. I'm just getting milk and bread from the shops. Can you check in with
Checking in
on
with
it?
you. Am I safe?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. So, now for those who may be eating, or I'd probably stop eating, and tell us about the jinga. What is a jinga?
Jiggers,
And
jiggers,
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 sorry,
jiggers.
jiggers. Yeah, tell us about that.
So they are a flesh-eating parasite, very, very common in sub-Saharan Africa, and they live in the ground in the dust. And what will happen is they're a little bit, yeah, like a sand flea. It will bury into your skin. Popular areas is sort of between next to the nail of your toes,
Yeah,
and will bury it in there. The abdomen swells, and then they sort of lay their eggs in there. So then they breed. It's so disgusting.
like
And
real life aliens.
oh, it really, it's so gross. And it was definitely one of my fears coming into this. But one of the things I'd done when I'd gone through all the things that could go wrong, medically related and injury related, this was one of them. So I knew what all the signs and symptoms were, and I'd looked at the signs and symptoms, and I'd started to exhibit them in my sort of left second little toe, some second littlest toe.
Yeah.
And I put my head in the sand for a few days and was like, oh no, it's not, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. It's not. And I was getting close to leaving Uganda and then going up to Sudan, and they don't have them up there. So there wouldn't be as many people who would know what to do. So I turned around to Pete, one of my rafting guides, and said, okay, do you think this is a jigger? And he said, yep. Mm. Okay. I said, do you know how to get it out? He said, yes. I said, okay, great. So I said, what do you need? So got my first aid kit out, and I had in there a scalpel, needle, and then he also got like a wooden cocktail stick. We doused everything in my toe in antiseptic. And then he went to work just trying to dig this thing out, because what you want to avoid is obviously bursting the abdomen, because then you just, the eggs will be released, and then you've got to get
From
each
within.
individual egg out.
Yeah.
So he would have spent about 20 minutes like just digging and digging and digging. Luckily, most of the skin was dead, so I didn't feel anything. And then eventually this like white pea-sized thing sort of erupted from my toe. It was so disgusting.
Oh, but
Um,
good at the same time,
but
right?
good at the same time. Yeah, it was like sort of almost watching like like a giant zit being popped. This thing, white, giant white hair coming out. It was really gross. Um, so yeah, and then just doused everything in more antiseptic, and took, I had antibiotics with me, so I took some antibiotics to be on the safe side so that I didn't get any infection, and it was fine.
So the
Faced.
body is pretty incredible, right? It's from within and out, and also the mind. You drew some strength in regards, this is before you went, you drew some strength from knowing that the body is incredibly resourceful, and you read and learnt a little bit about James Lawrence,
Yeah.
who had done 50 Ironmen in 50 states in America over 50 days. And it's the Iron Cowboy, right? Is that?
Yeah, the Iron Cowboy, yeah, who's
Yeah,
now,
so
obviously
yeah, for
gone on
those
and
that
doubled that. But at the time, like the 50 was just extraordinary. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So that for those that don't know, so an Ironman is 4.8 kilometer swim. Sorry, get it right, Ant. It's 3.8 kilometer swim, 180K bike ride, and a 42 kilometer marathon. So three disciplines and doing it back to back. And this gentleman did 50 in 50 days in 50 different states, which meant traveling from there. And just in terms of the body recovers, I'm aware that, I've read a little bit about him as well. He was riding his bike and he fell asleep like literally 3 or 4 times and crashed. I mean, hopefully Pete is not running along and sort of falls asleep. But like what did you gain from his experience in your journey and your challenge?
well, and that exact example was then when he fell off the bike. He really badly hurt his shoulder, to the
Yeah,
point that he couldn't swim, do front crawl, freestyle with that arm. So he did one-armed swimming
yeah,
for, I think it would have been like weeks, or certainly it was well over a week before that recovered. And in his view was, a snapped Achilles, yep, there's nothing you can do about that. Anything else, you find a way around. So for me, it was just like, oh, okay, you really can put like things going wrong. It's not a stop. It's you just keep going until you really cannot. And just how deep, how far you can push the body.
Yeah.
And obviously we've seen plenty of examples of that since, with Ned Brockman, with then what James Lawrence went on to do, which was the 101 Ironmans in 101 days, although he did stay in the same spot for that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
This extraordinary resilience, and both of those guys went through physically and pushed through. It comes down, so much of it mental. So for me, the back was getting sore, or this was getting sore, and that was getting sore. It's like, no, just find a way around it. I'd taken, when my shoulders were getting sore, and my wrist from the paddling, but I had with me a smaller blade size, so I switched to that, hoping that
Okay.
would put a little less pressure on, and that helped. I had Mobix, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. It was like my best friend on the trip. It's like probably not the smartest thing to be doing for a long period of time, but it was, I was willing to do that, to do what it took to get through it, and just know it would come back to mental more than anything.
And Sarah, um, if you could really just for a moment put yourself in Thailand, it's 40 plus degree heat. Um, it's Pete's run, you know, 50 kilometers for the day. He's got 10 more kilometers. He's already run 60 kilometers a day for the last 20 days. Um, and you were there, and knowing that, you don't know, you know Pete, but not really the inner Pete. What would you say if you sort of came up to him, either jogged up by his side or rode a bike up by his side or in a car up by his side? What would you do? How would you look at him? Would you give him a hug? Would you give him a smile? Would you give him, say words? Like what would you maybe relate to him now?
It was so dependent on, where he is on that day. But I think, the advice that I saw, and what I learned from people like James Lawrence, was it's just about shifting your focus to what isn't overwhelming in that moment. And that could be 10Ks, it could be 5K, it could be literally just the next step.
Yeah.
And it's like, if someone's really at that point, they're like, I don't think I can go anymore. It's like, just give me one more step. Can you give me one more step? Yeah, okay, I can do one. Okay, great. Now just do one more of those. Okay, great. Right. Now do another one of those. And that's,
And would it be one of your life lessons, and you outline five of those in your book? We won't go through all five now, but everyone's going to have to buy your book or get it. But one which I found, to resonate with Pete and all those that do the ride over in Thailand, and go back and do again and again, is finding your purpose. So is that the time when you tap in and just sort of think back to that purpose, that mission, or greater, doing good in life?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's, it's an incredible motivator in those moments when, when you're doing it for something other than yourself. It can be incredibly powerful. As long as it's coming from that deep why within, that there's something there. Either it is that cause that you're helping, or it is just so much about, you want to do it. When we dealt with that hippo attack, I stopped, and I asked myself, like, do I want to keep going? And I'm like, I don't know. And then it's like, then I asked myself, flipped it and said, okay, so do you want to stop? And every part of me was like, oh no, I don't want to stop. Because
Yeah.
there was so much, as I said, for me, I couldn't fully explain why it was so important, but I just knew I desperately wanted to do this. So yeah, and it was that got me back on the river, and I think it can be that, and whether that is because it's the cause that you're raising money for, or there is something that's just got some real deep meaning.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be really hard in those real tough moments. I feel like that having that deep purpose, it's like having a little bit of armor on, it deflects some of that pain, and those
Yeah.
tough moments, they're just not quite as brutal as they would be without that purpose and that meaning that you're assigned to it.
I like how you say that armor, that armor of purpose, the armor of knowing what can come out of it. the armor of, the excitement of the journey and overcoming fear, because, quite often, I'm freaking out. I don't say that. I say this is challenging, or, I'm excited, whereas, I might be shitting myself. So I'm
Yeah.
just like, I'm excited. And look, I think that's why we're humans, and that adrenaline is the endorphins going. I mean, I think that's why you want to do these things.
Mm.
It can be fear or excitement. And what is the
Yeah.
real difference? Just choose for it to be excitement.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we assign too much. It's either it's good or it's bad. And
Yeah.
sometimes it just is. Like when I did the cycle ride across Australia, Tara and I, our motto was, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. And half the time,
Yeah.
obviously we ended up using that so often, it just got abbreviated. So it is, basically, it is what it
It is
is.
what it is.
And
Yeah.
it's like, pain, we can go, oh, pain's bad. Well, maybe it just is.
Yep.
It's not about, it just is. And when we
Yeah.
stop assigning, positive or negative meaning to everything, again, we can make it that bit easier to just accept that. So, it almost comes back to that control the controllables. And how we reframe things, like you said, excitement, fear. What is a way that you could reframe it to make it okay to keep going in that moment?
Oh, I love that. Thanks. Yeah, that's so powerful. For listening to it, just rewind the last 3 minutes and just hear that again, kind of thing. Um, some takeaways from your journey, the Nile, or riding 5,000 kilometers, or whatever it might be. What are the biggest 2 to 3 kind of life lessons you'd like to share before we finish up?
I think, not settling, and I, acknowledge that comes from a place of enormous privilege in so many ways of being able to say that and do that. But, to go after those things, find those things that really make you come alive. Like the Nile trip, it made me come alive. And I know, it's not a
Yeah.
lifelong career or something like that, but that was what it was. It's like, what makes you come alive, and keep searching for that. I think that is really number one. And then to not worry about no, the how. It'll never be the right time. It wouldn't, the planets are not going to align perfectly, but just take the first step. And
Yeah.
just the how will work itself out. When it's that thing that you want, like that, everything else will work itself out somehow. It always
So
does, because there's an energy that comes, and depending, different spiritual beliefs on things, but you do make these things happen. They have a way of happening. So yeah, absolutely, find those things that make you come alive, go after it, and find the way through, what might hold you back, and the fears, because what you want is the other side of all those fears, and that better person. You find out so much about yourself, and your comfort zone just grows and grows.
there's definitely a common theme there between, the weekend warrior to the, elite athlete to the, explorer to the entrepreneur, the business owner, and that is, um, just do things that excite you, or try to win it, and that's the excitement. And just worry. And yeah, you're right. Just worry about the how later. And my dad always said to me, "Oh, just win it, or just do it. I'll worry about how to do it later.
Yeah.
That'll just work itself out. Like, we've got to get there first, because why worry about the how until you decide?" And
Yeah.
I love that. I think being optimistic, but not a blind optimist, is the key to that. Just what you said, like, what makes you come alive? Like,
Yeah.
that's incredible. So, Sarah, just before we go, how can people connect with you on social media or your website? Yeah, if they want to engage you to do some presentations or consulting.
Oh, thanks. So on social media, I am most active on Instagram. I'm on there as Sarah Paddles, as in paddling. Sarah Paddles, not pedals. And then on my website is sarahjdavis.com, Davis. And yeah, that's probably where I'm most active on there. I've got a newsletter I send out. It doesn't, you're not going to get spam because I don't. I try and get it out monthly, but that's it. But
Yeah,
there's like, you can see there's lots of blog articles which talk a lot about this kind of stuff, risk
yeah.
taking and being bold and how to deal with fear and things like that. So yeah, and then on LinkedIn would be the other one. You can hunt me down on there as well. Links through my website's probably easier because there's a few Sarah Davises out there.
There is, there is. But as you said, Sarah Davis, paddles or the Nile, or it'll come up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing just a very small snippet of your mindset, your resilience, something that we could even unpack more is that mental strength, and and something that I did want to that we didn't have a chance is body image for
Mhm.
guys and girls. Maybe, we can get you back and have a chat about that. But thank you again so much for those who have their own challenge this month or endeavoring on their challenge on a big audacious challenge. Get excited, come alive with your thoughts. Pete, you're alive, mate. You're living life to the fullest. You've done so much to literally, and I mean this because I've seen it, save generations in Thailand and the kids, and making a fuller, more exciting life for hundreds, well, thousands of kids and relatives as well. So until next time, we'll see you soon. Thanks again. Cheers. And if you want to follow Pete, obviously on the socials and donations, just jump to Hands Across the Water and please donate. Whether at $5, $50, or $500, every bit counts, and it goes towards an amazing cause. Thanks again. See you soon. Bye. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.